I'll give you a little bit of history about myself because it comes to play in why I do what I do. My dad was an artist, a professional artist, and he did lots of advertising in the times when stories in magazines were illustrated rather than photographed, et cetera, et cetera. So he was a big part of my life in influencing me in one way or another. Unfortunately, when I got a little bit older, he tried to teach me, and it stopped me in my tracks. I was about 10 or so. Then I did continue to draw on things, but you know, I think I early started to do it just to please Daddy. And so then I stopped, and I got into my career of, I was a teacher. And then when I was in my 40s, I was having a midlife crisis and wondered what I wanted to do with my life. So I went to somebody who was doing art therapy and asked her if I could train to be an art therapist. And she said, you'd do really well with the background you have, because I worked with emotionally disturbed children and I worked in a psychiatric ward. But I want you to go take a couple of drawing courses, which I did. And I had such a good time. I said, I don't want to do this as a job. I want to do it for myself. I'm having too much fun with this. So I continued working, and on the side, I was painting. I worked in acrylic. I then moved for about 8 years into sculpting. I was sculpting when I met Hamilton, and then I went from sculpting to pastel, and now I'm working pretty consistently in oil. So that gives you kind of a little background. I think that in our house, when I was growing up, color and shape and form was always talked about. I never had any formal training in my art. Occasionally, you know, I'll spend time on the internet and look at YouTube. There's lots of good stuff on YouTube. And if I'm feeling a little dull and boring with my own, technique, I'll flip on a YouTube, and that always gives me ideas. I did take 1 or 2 little courses. I took a little course at Emily Carr and stuff, but basically self-taught. And I actually discovered, and it's something that if I actually took a course from somebody, and because I'm essentially a pleaser, I would pick up all that they're saying. And it took me a year or so then to get back to something that was coming from inside me. So I'm very careful about who I expose myself to in a learning situation. I want to be in a position, that's why I love YouTube. I'd be in a position to take what I want and leave it. And they don't ever get to see what I do with it. So that works better for me. So in 2002, before 2002, I started doing plein air. And maybe, Andrew, you could show the first painting. So plein air, for those of you that aren't aware, is when you go out into the country or wherever, the city, doesn't really matter. And so number 2, I guess. And you paint just what you see, and you paint quickly because light changes. And you would recognize the Impressionists started that. Before that, painting was a studio thing. And once the Impressionists did it, they only had a certain amount of time. And you can see in their work, it's not heavily worked over. It's impressionistic. It's a wonderful experience to do that, to be outdoors and spend 2.5 hours or 3 hours. The Impressionists themselves would go back again and again to the same place. Nowadays, when I work with other plein air artists, usually we just go one place, we get down what we can and leave it, and try not to take it back to the studio, because if you take it back to the studio, it loses some of its spontaneity and integrity, because your palette looks different, and you can do it, but I don't. So this is an example of a plein air piece that I did locally. The deer was from, I cheated. The deer I plunked in there afterwards, I have to say, because it needed it. So I just got home and hauled out some photographs of deer and put the deer in there. That sold, so I guess it was approved. So anyways, in 2002, I retired, and I tried at that time, because I had done a lot of music and art with children in school, I felt like I should do some volunteer work. So I tried to volunteer in an Indigenous school teaching drama. And every time I went, it got heavier and heavier and heavier. And finally I stopped. I thought, gee, this doesn't feel right for volunteering. So I stopped volunteering and just spent my time doing this plein air work, which I loved. And I would go to, there was a group of us who met once a week, and we would do portraits of a live sitter. Usually one of us would sit, or we'd bring in a friend who would sit. Then in 2007, after 30 days of fasting, well, I'll step back. Around 2005, 2006, 2007, the city of Victoria began to panic a little bit because of the increasing numbers of homeless people on the streets. And we're a tourist city, so they were pretty, people were getting pretty freaked out by all the begging and things, and it just didn't fit our Canadian image. So one of the street ministers, a man called autistic, started getting money together and applying for grants, et cetera, to build an official building for homeless people in which services could be provided and sleeping quarters for those people who were ready to get off the street. So by 2007, I was aware of all that happening, and I just finished the fast. Truly, it was the day of the finishing the fast. And I was sitting there feeling like, I love painting, but I feel like I need to be giving back. And it came to me to, maybe I could paint portraits of the homeless people. And because I often have good ideas and don't follow through, I thought, well, I won't say anything to anybody. I didn't even tell my husband. I went out and met some people on the street and got their permission and painted 3 portraits and thought, yeah, I'm into this. I will continue this. So then I went to autistic, the street minister, who was doing all sorts of political things, and he's not a political man. It was a struggle for him. He was thrilled, and he said, yeah, let's do this. This is great, and I'll support you, and I'll get you in touch with the street people, and I'll give you a waiver form. I'll make sure you're protected, and he was wonderful. So I started painting portraits of street people. Andrew, maybe you can. So this gallery that I'm standing in front of in this picture is the dining room of the new Our Place building, which was built for $18 million. And they have a wonderful dining room. They have many facilities. It's pretty impressive. So all the portraits that I painted, I can't remember how many there were, but must have been 30 or so. They're all over the walls, and they're also in people's homes. So I started painting the portraits, and if you want to run some of them through, Andrew. So I'll just give you a quick idea. By doing this project, spiritually, I gained a huge amount. First, I discovered that everybody is such an individual. And the reason they were on the street, you know, when you would hear people kind of lump them together, don't go too fast, Andrew, I'll come back and talk about them a little bit. You can't lump these people together because how they got on the street is so individualistic. And anyways, I was highly educated by that whole prospect and experience and really enjoyed the people. My process at that time was I would approach individuals and tell them what I was doing. And I only ever had one person turn me down. They were thrilled. And I would spend half an hour and listen to their stories and then produce a painting and bring it back and show it to them. And I think for them psychologically, it was really positive because they had my full attention. and somebody was painting them. They were, you know, by the time you're living on their street, your image and your self-view is pretty low. Anyways, it was wonderful. So this is Raven. Raven himself was an artist. He was the child of a residential school parent. And as you probably know, many of those people who came out of the residential schools really didn't know how to parent because they'd never been parented. So their children suffered and continue to suffer, although there's been huge gains made lately. I've kept in touch with a few of these people. And so when you look at this picture, those, the raven at the bottom, that's, I actually copied his art. And he did this, the same with the feather, that's his art. So what I do in the background is usually a combination that represents the people and with something they might like too. So the next one, Andrew. So an example, this man, he was, I don't know correctly this, I could say, I think he was schizophrenic or maybe bipolar, but he would go off into the woods for 3 and 4 weeks at a time and collect wood, and he loved to carve and do things with the wood. But every place he went, he ended up turning everybody off because you can see it. I call it intensity. When you were talking with him, it could be actually a scary proposition. He got more and more intense. His eyes would get bigger and he would start gesturing and sometimes picking up his tools, which were knives and carvers. And it was actually a bit scary. Anyways, okay, the next one. And the man in the hat. This man sat in the entranceway to our place, and with this hat every day. He would come from wherever he had spent the night, and he would sit in the entranceway and greet people. I don't know a great deal about his story, except that he was extremely depressed before he started getting involved with our place. I think, yeah, he's a lovely guy, actually. It was fun to talk with him. Next one. This is Karen. She had many physical problems, and it's just amazing that these people managed to live. When I saw, like you can see her hands, they were very arthritic. She was in pain a lot. She's in a wheelchair. And at this point, she might have been living in our place. They have 45 bedrooms. And it was difficult talking with her. She would flip on you and get angry really quickly, but then also be calm again, and then suddenly get angry. And so it was difficult. You could see why people would have difficulty hiring her or renting a room to her or something like that. But anyways, I'm giving you a little background so you can see that everybody's so very different. Okay, the next one. This man, I think, has since died, but he was really fun to talk to. He lived in a different world for sure. And he talked a lot about the various planets and what they were doing to us individually and what they were doing in his head and the various ways people had gotten into his head. And he loved jewelry. I don't know where he got it, but you can see he has all this jewelry. And he would go to, he had a place to live. He would go to our place for the company, get a coffee. Our place has a continually revolving snack place, and truly anybody can go there. It's very open and friendly. And he would go and chat with people, and that's how I met him. Okay, next one. Oh, that's it. Okay, so after that project, I earned, I think, $23,000 then. And then the next year I came back and painted another 6 or 7, but altogether we made about $27,000. And I had some friends who said, when they found out what I was doing, they said, oh gosh, how can we be part of that? And I said, I hate selling like many artists. So maybe you could just take over getting this out in the world. And they did. They got us a big show in the city hall with all the paintings and a show in one of the theaters. And they cold called and they went around to various companies, and they sold quite a number, and they sold quite a number individually. And people took them. And some people donated them back, and that's what's on the wall at our place. And some that didn't sell, no, actually they all sold. They were just the ones that are on the wall are all donated back. So then my husband Hamilton and I decided that we were tired of cold, wet winters, and we found a lovely little place down in Florida, actually. And we were Halima's, where did Halima go? She's not here anymore. Anyways, we were her neighbors. And we went there 6 months of the year, and I did a lot of plein air there. And when I came home, did more plein air. And this is an example of the plein air I did there. There was a big group. It was just starting since we started. So that was about 2010. We started this plein air group, and it was beginning to start all over the States. And now if you go to the States, plein air is huge. They have these big competitions. And you have to be invited to go to them, and they paint for 3 or 4 days, and then they have these huge sales. There are artists who have vans, and they travel around from competition to competition. They're professional. But, you know, as an amateur, you can get in occasionally. So I put this one on because this was a plein air thing, and I won. So these are the birds you find down there, and it gives you a little bit. Okay, so show the next one. Oh, right. Okay. Well, we went every 6 months, and when we came back in 2017, we were back a week, and Hamilton had a stroke, which has left him in a wheelchair. So Florida was out, and we sold out down there, and I had a life here now in Victoria, and was thinking, what can I do? I need to be home more. Plein air is outdoors and away. I still went to a few of those, but mostly I need to be home. What can I do? And at that time, I started thinking about some of my women friends who are my age, generally. And I've thought of many of them who've done wonderful things in drama, in music, in politics, and they'd made a huge impact on the community. And now, like me, they were fading. So I thought, what if I was to start painting portraits of these women in honor of them and bring them back to people's attention for a short while before we bite the dust, so to speak. So I did, and I went to our place and got in touch with their fundraisers, and they said, yeah, nothing's ever been done like this before, but let's try it. And this was before COVID. So I started painting portraits of these women in the community. And some of them, I'll show you in a minute, some of them you'll know. And about halfway through, COVID hit. And our plan originally was to have a big, fancy do event, and people drink a little and they bid on things and spend a lot of money, but obviously that wasn't going to happen. So how to do this? We set up well, I didn't do it, thank God, because I'm not a technician. So our place set up a program where people could go in and see all the portraits, look at and find one that they liked or somebody they knew, and donate money to it. And that would honor that person. And it also was a giving to our place. And many people during, I don't know about in other parts of the world, but in Canada, when COVID hit, people's feelings of generosity were huge. People were giving money to many charities, and there was a understanding that there was great need. So we actually benefited from COVID on another level too, because this was always available. And it was up, the whole project was up online for about 3 months. we could send out regular reminders to people, because people my age, we see something, we like it, and then we forget about it. So we say, oh, I'm going to donate on that. And then it leaves the mind, never to be seen again. So this was beneficial for us. And people did have the opportunity to bid $1,000. Well, not bid, but just put down $1,000, and the portrait was theirs. And quite a few family members actually did that. But otherwise, I just kept sending out different ways for my subject. And I apologized and said, I know you didn't expect to be part of our PR here, but I need you to contact your friends. I need you to tell them that this money all of it's going to our place. And you please get online and donate whatever you can. And so there was a lovely line under every portrait, and you could see the money coming in 10s, 20s, 300s, 400s, thousands. It was great. And I made it at that with this. Oh, and then at the end, Bonnie Henry agreed to have her portrait done. So that was a huge feather in our cap, and we made lots of PR with that. And this is a picture. I did 2 of hers. This is one, and this one she bought. The other one was bid on at something else and was sold. But altogether, we made $48,000. So it was a huge success. So let's go through, and I'll just show you some of the ones that we did. This is Robin Farrell. She's a radio announcer, and she really went to bat for us, and is going to bat for the next project I'm on, because people come to me and say, oh, I heard your name on the radio. Oh, I heard it 2 times. So Robin must be talking us up on the radio. It's a local radio station. Okay, next one. This is my friend Agnes. She's 93 now, 94. And she's been a huge influence on music. Her family are all musicians. Her grandson's now singing in one of the big opera companies. And she was involved, she and I played in quartets together, and she was involved in amateur orchestras, and she's just incredibly full of life. I should be so cheery when I'm 93. Okay, the next one. This is Bernice Camano. Bernice Camano is also Indigenous and is family related to the residential schools. She now works on the streets and is someone who goes out when an Indigenous person is having trouble with the authorities. She will go and help them out and involve herself in whatever it is, and kind of translate, kind of be the intermediary. And that this was a paint. The background there is from the museum. That was her choice. Okay, next one. This is Florence Dick. Florence Dick also has quite a status in her tribe. And she's standing in front of the whale wall, which is also the breakwater in Victoria. And it's painted with Indigenous pictures that all represent something. That's the wolf on the top, and you've got the whale there, and they call it the whale wall. Anyways, Florence Dick, what she does is she is an intermediary. She involves herself in all the city meetings, etc., when they're making decisions. And so she is a representative for her community. Okay, the next one. Lorna Kreuzer, maybe many of you know Lorna Kreuzer. She's a pretty well-known poet, I think, around Canada, Canadian poet. And also she teaches at UVic. I don't know if she still does. She was married to Patrick Lane, who some of you might have read his book. Again, that's, my era. She's great. She was actually, when I did this, she was still grieving. Patrick died a couple years ago. But she's great fun. I mean, she's my age. I love the red in her hair and these Farrell glasses. She was fun to interview and paint. Next one. This is Carol Sabbaston, and some of you might know Carol also. She was well known for her fabric art. For the longest time, there was 2 or 3 hangings at the ferry terminal, and I'm pretty sure in Ottawa. She's well known across Canada. Certainly, if you talk to people who are into fabric art, they would know who she is. She was married to a man called Monroe, who has a big bookstore here. Okay, next one. This is Charlene Thornton Joe. She's a counselor and has been for years and years on the city council. Charlene's background is Asian and Indigenous. She was certainly one of the first Asian people on our council. So yeah, she's was really made big strides and kind of broke down some barriers city-wise for us. I actually did another one. She isn't up there. I'm trying to think of her name. She was the first legislative Asian person. Anyways, I don't have her picture up here, but I painted her too. Okay, next one. And that's Mary Wynne Ashford. And some of you might know her. She was headed up Physicians Against Nuclear Arms. And at one point, she was head of the World Organization. Now she's lectures and goes around to schools and wherever. And she's pretty much retired, but big into the peace and her dog. That was fun. I think that's probably it, isn't it, Andrew? Okay, so that went really well. And I was just kind of having a breather last summer when our place approached me and said, well, what do you think about doing another go at youth? I took a big, really? And how much time do you have? Oh, well, we want to put it on next June. I said, how many do you expect me to get? Well, I'm going to tell you about my process after this. This forced me to change my process because I had to paint quickly. We'll have 25 for when this project opens up, and maybe I'll be painting a few more after that. I'm not sure. So these are youth of Victoria, in the Victoria area, and these are all known because of their advocacy and the groups they have put together and the way they're handling COVID. And it's music, sports. We've asked the community to nominate young people, and that's who I'm painting. So this young man is Ned. I forgot his last name. Anyways, he's 21 and he's a Saanich councillor. He was elected onto the council. So that made him pretty, and he's on a ton of boards and he's very pro-environment. That's why we have that picture in the back. He's well known. Every other young person I painted knew of Ned, so he's well known. Okay, the next one. This is Chanel Mandap, and Chanel works with older people, and she conducted and put together a choir of older people. And she has, I'm trying to remember these. They've come through so fast. I don't remember them nearly as well as I do the women that I did, the older women that I did. But Chanel has something on the computer, I think, where people come and can join at 5:30 and 6:30, and they do projects for people to keep them busy at home, shut-ins, mostly seniors. Okay, next one. This is Vanessa Simone, and Vanessa became well-known in town for being part of the Black Lives Matter movement and pushing that. And she's involved in many other, I don't know how to describe it, racial things, but to break down in diversity, break down. I'm not great with words, sorry. Okay, next one. And this is Parker Johnson. Parker Johnson does some interesting things. He works, he's a consultant, and he's hired by companies and schools. And he started something before COVID called dinner talk, I think it was, or table talk. And he actually would invite people to his place and give them food. And they would begin conversations about racism and diversity. So now he is hired to go into companies, etc., and begin those conversations to break down bigotry and racism. And he goes into schools and talks to kids, and he's lovely. I consider this one of my better paintings, by the way. Okay,
yes.
Yeah. Next one. This is Matali Sharma. I love, by the way, that I got so many diverse young people to paint from many different cultures. And Matali is, her parents come from East India. And she, again, has put together online groups to discuss many things. She's an accomplished musician. She's been training young girls in the dance from her country of origin. And she's just graduating, so she'd probably be about 18 or 17, I guess, this year. Just a lovely person. Next one. This is James Summer. James is in transition. And struggling. But I'm really glad that he also, what he's really known for is that he is the Poet Laureate for Victoria this year. The Youth Poet Laureate. So that in the background are bits of his poems. It was interesting talking to him. He's very open about his struggles in school and with his family. His family of origin were brought up in a religion that is not open to diversity in gender. So he's really struggled a lot. Okay, next one. This is Timoseng, and Timoseng is part of the Saanich Reserve. He's a carver. He's taken over his father's retired, and he carves. He has a beautiful studio, and does wonderful work. I've tried to paint a little bit in the background, his work that he's done. I was so glad that someone recommended him because we don't get many. It's amazing. There were so many more women, young women nominated than young men. And so I'm glad that we've managed to get these young men. The young men don't seem to be doing as much in terms of advocating. Yeah. Okay, next one. And this is Sage Lacerte. Sage is also she is Indigenous and from, I don't remember the names of the tribes that she's from, but she has started a company called Sage something, and what Sage Incorporated, something like that. Her company guides Indigenous women on how to invest their money and where to invest it in a moral way, and guides them through dealing with white culture, with the investment culture. It's kind of unique, very unique. She's also involved with the Moose Hide campaign. She's the youth representative for the Moose Hide campaign. And that campaign is mostly for men, actually. Men put it together, and it's to address violence of men towards women. It's quite amazing, actually. Okay, next one. This is Asiya Robinson. She's living in Canada now, but she comes from Barbados, perhaps. My memory is just terrible. Anyways, when I went and met her and took all sorts of pictures, she is such a diverse personality, I couldn't settle on one. So that's why you have 3 pictures of her there. And she does many things. She's a very accomplished musician in many instruments, not just one. And she's been very involved in Black Lives Matter, and she's been involved in many of the groups at the university. I mean, she's quite lively. Is that our last one that we have? Oh no, this is Jessica Sewell. Jessica is right now carrying on her education in Paris. So we did all of this via internet. She won Royal Bank of Canada $40,000 scholarship for her activities, and they are multitudinous. And I forget what they all were, but she's made quite a name for herself, and you can just see the way she stands. She's quite a lady. She's strong-minded and has lots to offer, very intelligent and quick. Is that it now? No, we got, okay, there I am. Okay, so I don't know, well, thank you very much. I don't know if you are at all interested in my process, but I wanted to explain because I know that many of you, Hamilton has this saying that I really like, that we spend our life getting out of the coffin of prejudice into which we're born. And I like that expression very much. And one of the things that I learned I'm always learning things when I'm painting so much, and particularly because I had to paint quick, toot, sweet. I saw that I had a prejudice that I came to deal with around my art. And it was because of my family, and there was a determination and a value of authenticity. You know, you didn't trace things. No. You didn't use coloring books. No. Everything had to be drawn and it had to be from scratch, blah, 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 blah. And so I inherited that and have realized towards the beginning of this project that when I go online and look at other people's art, I don't say to myself, how do they get there? I don't say, what's their technique? I say, do I like that piece? Does it look good? Does it make me feel good? And so I flipped, and instead of struggling, and I struggled a lot with a lot of those women's portraits, I'm very determined to make sure it looks like them and they're easily identified. And they were ultimately, but I struggled hours drawing them, trying to get everything just right. Oh my God, that eye is a millimeter out, and having to get the nose. Oh, that doesn't look right. They're not looking at the right place, and struggling. And I went online and looked up an artist whose work I find very interesting. His name is Ben Lustenhauer. And I was shocked and delighted to find out, and he's highly regarded, that he has 3 or 4 ways of doing a portrait. He projects a picture of them and gets all the points. Get where the eye starts, get where the mouth starts, gets the line, or he traces them on before he starts. And I was shocked, and I thought, my God, I'm struggling so hard. Who am I trying to impress? Well, actually, nobody. I mean, I didn't need to do that. So my process now does involve a kind of tracing. You know, I take when I'm dealing with people, I probably take 50 or 60 photos, and I'm talking to them all the time. I won't paint portraits from other people's photos. I have done, but I don't like it. So I kind of get to feel them, and then I put them on my computer and start discarding ones that I don't feel will work. And I get down to about 10, and then I make a final decision. And sometimes I might take an expression, and as long as it's in the right lighting, and from one picture and put it in, but often I'll settle on one piece, and then I shorten it and get the face, and I print it out, I cover it with chalk on the back, and I go over it, trace it on the front onto my canvas. And then I'm a good enough drawer. I can draw in the body. Sometimes I screw up on the hands. That's always a challenge. But so that has really it's shortened and it's decreased my tension and my anxiety because I get it right from the start. I'm not messing around. And sometimes the pictures got pretty mussy and muddy, what I call muddy, because you're trying to make it just so. And now I don't do that. And actually, people keep telling me, God, your art's getting better. Your portraits are getting better. And they are. And who cares? And so I haven't told anybody but you guys. I figured, you know, nice Subud group. I think I'm done. Unless, yeah, I'm open to questions.
Thanks very much, Elfrida. That's wonderful. Yeah, really. So we've got quite a few people here who are enjoying your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to put it on. Oh my goodness me.
So I'm going to start. Marcus, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah. It was lovely presentation. I really like your paintings. They're so bold and strong. I'm glad you said what you ended with, because it's exactly what I was going to say, because I noticed on the very first painting with the stag in the woods, you said, I cheated. And I thought, I've got to say, I don't believe there is no cheating in art. And there's a wonderful book called, it's by David Hockney, the famous English painter. It's called Secret Knowledge. And he spent hours researching and researching. He puts all the great artists into two categories. He calls them eyeballers. I can't remember what the other category is, but eyeballers are the painters who actually just draw and paint directly on the canvas. And the other group used camera obscura, camera lucida, anything they could to project images onto the canvas, which they would then copy. They actually used mirrors, not lenses, because they weren't invented then. Right. But what was I going to say? I've forgotten.
Well, I was going to say back to that, Marcus, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I realize how deeply, when we talk about our prejudices and our values, and how deeply that gets embedded in us when we're children. And you're right, I used the word cheating, and in spite of doing it differently now, down deep, if someone came and said you're cheating, I would just crumble, because I've been so imbued with that from my family.
I understand that. Yeah. No, there ain't no cheating.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much, Marcus. Mike Pichicero, you have to unmute yourself, Mike.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I actually taken count of how many people I got here. I've got about 16 people. That's great to see. Thanks, Elfrida. I really enjoyed that, and I'm glad I was able to join. It took me away from something I was getting sore at doing, digging a post hole. But I really learned a lot, and I've never painted or drawn anything, but I've collected quite a bit of art. Most of it's from somebody I met, a neighbor of some good friends in India. And I stayed next door to this artist. He's well known in India, but I've got his paintings all over the place. And I really don't have a clue what they mean. They're kind of abstractish, but they just, something about his art just drew me into his world. And I remember I spent quite a bit of time with him. He also painted with music, and he loves Indian classical music, but he probably used a lot of other types of music. I just had a question. Do you use music in your process?
When I first started painting, I always put Bach on. When I was younger, I was nervous, really nervous all the time. And somehow Bach, because of the regularity of it, it took hold of a part of my brain and it calmed it down. And I would paint. I would be focused on what I was doing. And so it was a very restful experience. Now I just listen to CBC, the music station. Yes, I have music on all the time when I paint. And I find as soon as I turn it on and start painting, everything relaxes. I did want to say one thing. When I first got in Subud, people asked me, did I feel when I was painting, was I guided or did I feel something from the Latihan? And I didn't know what to answer back then. But now if you asked me, I would say not directly, but certainly doing the Latihan regularly has allowed me to do two things. One, get more and more in contact with my real inner energy, not my head energy, but my real inner energy. And it also has allowed me to be more honest with myself. Example being just sharing that with you and acknowledging my, the bad parts of me, and acknowledging it allows me to disengage from my art and look at it more objectively and not get so emotionally tied up in it. Or, people can say, some people used to say one little criticism of my art and I was destroyed. But now I can put it in its place. I can have people criticize and then someone else will love a piece. And I do attribute that part of my art to doing the Latihan.
Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed your stories a lot about the people you painted, and all of them. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mike. Rohana Salom, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am Rohana Salom. Elfrida, I admire your work a lot. Since in Puebla, I never met you before. I didn't know your work. I can see that over here there is a lot of Canadians, and maybe in Canada you are very well known. In Subud you are also very well known. But I want to ask you about your childhood and your father. I mean, you said that he stopped you when you were 10. And I find that the inheritance of art is kind of basic. Like my father also was an artist, but he died when I was 8 years old. So I missed the information she could have given me, but he didn't give me any information, and I had to kind of whatever. And I also noticed that geographically, when I am in the United States, I cannot paint. But when I go back to Mexico, I paint. And I went and did the astrology, traveling, whatever, what is the best place for you. And it would have been better for me to live in the East Coast of the United States. But in California, it's very difficult to work for me. It's like it doesn't happen. So I am going to do something else. But I do want to know about your father and your childhood, if you can.
Sure.
What did he teach you?
Well, my father certainly broke with his family to be an artist. He trained in England. He trained with a student of sergeants, and he went on to work alternately in the advertising business when we needed money. And then when he'd get fed up with it, he'd quit and he would just paint commissions if he could get them. So we were often rich and poor. And he made a name for himself painting horses. He painted the Queen's Plate winners and people's pet horses. He made a pretty good name for himself. But I'm a strong-willed person, and I was a strong-willed child, but also really needy. I just wanted him to like everything. I didn't want him to tell me how to do it. I just wanted him to tell me I was lovely and he adored me, but he didn't, and I every night he'd come home from work and I'd give him my paintings that I'd done when I was a little kid. And that was okay. And then when I started about 10, 11, 12, I started painting more things, and he would come in and sometimes pick up a brush and correct it. I was devastated. I couldn't handle that because my motivation wasn't, yeah, I liked doing what I was doing, but my motivation was to please my daddy. And that wiped me out. So I used to draw at school and stuff like that. I did lots of art and drawing and stuff, but I didn't show it to him. And then when I was older and I had children of my own, I'm so glad I had one session with him. I went and he was dying, actually. He didn't know it, but he actually had cancer and didn't know it. And I asked him if he'd show me how to do work with watercolors. That's not something I've worked with. And he did. It was very moving for me. And he was very moved too. I could see that he was so happy to be able to impart knowledge to me. You know, it's always about the personalities. I mean, my dad was who he was and I was who I was. And some other child might have just adored that their dad guided them through it, but not me.
But what I find really very interesting in your painting is the shading. I mean, not only the shape of the human body, because for me, human bodies are the most difficult part. I really decide not to paint humans because I don't know how to do it. And I mean, do you give classes by Zoom on
No,
YouTube to do that?
Because I was a teacher, I just don't want to be a teacher. But I was going to say, in my history of working with art, once I went back and took those drawing classes and decided I was going to do it, I painted in acrylics for about 6 years. And then, and this is really important, I spent about 8 years sculpting. And sculpting the human body. So I got a feel for parts. And I also, you know, I studied. It's a technique. It's like anything. You want to learn how to draw? Go online. There's great ideas of how to draw. You want to know about bodies? It's all geometric. You know, if you draw a face and you cut it across the middle, draw an oval, cut it across the middle, that's where the eyes are. You know, you can go and learn all the techniques. And as far as the shading, I think that's what the term you use, value. And value is something I struggle with all my life. Value makes a painting. I don't know how else to describe it. Yeah.
So we'll move on now to Halima Polk. Halima, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself, though.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Elfrida, that was great. I was wonderful, and I'm so glad that I'm here. I am an owner. I'm just a proud owner of 2 of Elfrida's paintings, so I'm very happy. So one of the things I want to talk to you about, because I was seeing all your portraits today, are you doing any plein air stuff or any nature paintings?
Right. Not right now, not because I don't want to, but I am just so busy. I'm every morning in the studio. I'm pumping out a portrait a week.
That's unbelievable. For this project.
Yeah, for the project. And I love it.
Right.
And you know what? When I feel the pressure, and when it stops, I'm going to be bereft. I'm going to miss it. You know, it's one way to learn, you know.
And I, you know, I don't know enough about painting to make a compliment, but I too, like Rohanna, was very impressed with their shadings. I mean, I really am. And the backgrounds of the portraits I thought were really beautiful. And of course, the people are so interesting that you selected to paint. It's kind of a wonderful project.
Yeah, thank you.
And also for the people themselves. Yeah.
May I? Elfrida, how is your pricing? You know, because you made $48,000. I mean, that is not cheap.
No, it's if you wanted to buy the portraits outright, they're $1,000. But a lot of the portraits made more. The women's portraits, one of them made $5,000. People just kept putting on money. Robin Farrell, who you saw there, they love her so much on the radio. She's very funny. And she just jokes about everybody. And hers just kept climbing and climbing. I think it was over $2,000. People just would donate. She asked them to. Yeah.
Wow, nice.
Luke, Lukeman, you had, Solomon, you had your hand up. What did you want to ask?
I'm well, first of all, I'm a huge local fan. So, and I'm most struck by the fact that you're somehow able to capture the essence of the people that you paint. And because Bonnie Henry, who, by the way, is our Chief Medical Officer of Health for BC, just for people who don't know, that the very first portrait has become something of a heroine for us, of course, during COVID. And people like that, I really feel you've captured her essence. And it's a bit like when First Nations, say, you don't take my photograph, you steal my soul. But in a good way, somehow, you've been able to capture there's one in particular, that young man, the consultant, who you said was one of your favorites or best. It's almost like looking at an Iroquois chief, from the Confederacy of 100 years ago. I mean, this man has such power and force in him, and you've captured it. And the same with Bonnie and with these beautiful women and young people. So going back to your point about Latihan and Subud and so on, I feel as though something is revealed to you. Do you feel that in fact, in terms of their nature and their inner self, there's a connection that you really are able to make, even though with a Bonnie Henry, you only maybe get 15 minutes of her time because she's the busiest woman in British Columbia. But do you feel that you have this connection that you're able to feel?
Before I ever got into Subud, I was working in a psychiatric hospital for children. And I've always had a great affinity for children. They can stop me mid-sentence just watching one run across the street. And I think it was because as a child, I never felt heard. So I felt a need to really listen to children and really see who they are. And so the work that I did as a teacher and as a social worker was very kid-oriented and very focused. And I remember at the time that people would say, my principal or other social workers, wow, your report really caught that kid, just where they're at. And I think it comes from a need to be understood. Then in terms of the Latihan, I think that the Latihan has given me more inner peace, and I hear and see a person even better. That's all.
It comes across.
Thank you.
Something really comes across. And and by the way, having done life classes myself at various times as a bit of an amateur, I know how the challenge of hands. You said it's the toughest. It's so difficult. And I recognize that. But I also think that the way in which you place your subjects in the portrait series, the backgrounds, as Halima said, is absolutely exquisite and so meaningful. It's really, really good. So thank you for being who you are and doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much fun.
Thanks very much, Lukman. Who else would like to say something? Helena.
Rohanna Lang.
I'm going to go to Helena Van Zeglen. If you can. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Rohanna, not Rohanna, Elfrida. I loved the whole thing. Wonderful. Everything what the other people said, I agree. I have a question. Like I did super short course, but I kind of disliked oil because it takes an enormous time to dry. So how do you do that? How do you do that in a week?
Well, it's interesting. You pick up information. If you are working plein air, you learn quickly that you apply your first layers very thinly. And I use odorless mineral spirits, and it dries it quickly. And you can also get something else, I forget what it's called, but it helps dry. And also when you're working with oils, which is different than working with I'm having a mind break. Anyways, it's acrylics. It's different than acrylics because if you paint something with acrylic, you can just paint another color over it, and that's the color that stands. If you paint with oil and you paint oil over it, what's under the back comes out. So you paint, that's in your mind all the time. You paint light layers of dark first. You do, but I mean thin layers. So you use more fluid with your paints. So it's thin. And then as you're growing along, you thicken and thicken and thicken so that your last ones are quite thick and you're getting lighter and lighter. And amazingly, light will, if you haven't painted too thickly with your dark, light will go over very nicely over dark. And again, it's just, it's like practice. I prefer it because you can smooth, you can mush up your edges. That's why I like it. You don't, whereas acrylic, I found, oh, it dries so fast, you know, and I work all over my paint. I don't just focus on one little thing. So I'm working the whole canvas all the time, back and forth. So if something goes and dries on me and I want to change it and it's dried, I can't work it. So yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, it's amazing. Amazing what you do. And it is wonderful. And to raise all that money for people, it's, you know, because it's not only, you're not only painting, you're doing active, you're an activist. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Elena. I just got a note here that Marcus Bolt has to go, but he admired your presentation as well, and he's looking forward to the YouTube video. Okay. So let's go to Rohanna Lang. Rohanna, just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Just wanted to thank you for this very professional presentation, Elfrida. And I wanted to make a couple of comments, having known you for many years and watched your process and progress, that you're a good example of an artist who learns by doing, and you do it your own way. You've developed your own style without being influenced too much by other people. There's a lot to say about that, and I think it's very Subud also. Yeah. To have a way of being and want to stay with that. I've seen how your work has gradually improved and continues to improve by doing. And that's probably not that much difference. The people that are trained go to school and do it in school all day, and people that are self-trained are doing it in a different way in their own time. But I'm also impressed with how you've almost combined Cecilia Dharma with SICA. And you've been able to help so many people. And you've had this tendency, even when you were chair of SICA in Canada, you worked very hard on showing other artists' talents in that wonderful calendar that you used to produce every year. And I remember we all enjoyed seeing that. It was an awful lot of work, but you were really supporting the artists and the members across Canada at that time. And now in these projects, you're supporting other people. I would say you're very much a people person, and keep on doing what you're doing. Things are going well for you. It's nice to see your work being so well received.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rohanna. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was going to laugh when you were saying, I mean, when you go to school, maybe you learn shortcuts and make things move faster. I mean, I see young artists and think, God, they've got that down pat, and I'm still struggling with it. On the other hand, I'm such a rebellious individual that I don't, anyways, it's better the way I learned for me.
Hi, I just wanted to say, Elfrida, I got to find you there. There's your image. I think Lukman said it really well, or Suleiman rather, but that I love how you make everybody shine. Even the street people that you painted seem to glow from within. It's like you found the best part of them. And adore the backgrounds. I'm also the proud owner of a couple of your paintings, so I've loved your style for a long time. And I was also thinking maybe someone needs to do a portrait of you.
They have.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
and if ever, I've also done some self-portraits, but if ever we actually have a show, he said I can have it to put up, and it's a cute one. It's just the head, and he's just got me bang on.
Oh, well, I think that portrait should be hung in our place, just to have, I think maybe you need to be honored for all that amazing work that you've done. And it's just been, okay. Anyway, it's just been a real treat today. So
thank you so much, Adelia.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, maybe that's it, Andrew. Are we done?
Thanks.
Well, okay. Thank you so very much, Elfrida.